"All poppycock!" the general shouted. "That and this other talk about using up resources. Whatever we did in the past, or are about to do, has been done already. I've lain awake nights, mister, thinking about all these things, and there is no answer, believe me, except the one I give you. The question which faces us here is an immediate one. Do we give up all this, or do we keep on watching that Wisconsin farm, waiting for them to come back? Do we keep on trying to find, independently, the process or formula or method that Adams found for traveling in time?" "We've had no luck in our research so far, General," said the quiet physicist who sat at the table's end. "If you were not so sure, and if the evidence were not so convincing that it had been done by Adams, I'd say flatly that it is impossible. We have no approach which holds any hope at all. What we've done so far might best be described as flounder. But if Adams turned the trick, it must be possible. There may be, as a matter of fact, more ways than one. We'd like to keep on trying." "Not one word of blame has been put on you for your failure," the chairman told the physicist. "That you could do it seems to be more than can be humanly expected. If Adams did it, if he did, I say, it must have been simply that he blundered on an avenue of research no other man has thought of." "You will recall," said the general, "that the research program, even from the first, was thought of strictly as a gamble. Our one hope was, and must remain, that they will return." "It would have been so much simpler all around," the State Department man said, "if Adams had patented his method." The general raged at him. "And had it published all neat and orderly in the Patent Office records so that anyone who wanted it could look it up and have it?" "We can be most sincerely thankful," said the chairman, "that he did not patent it." Chapter 6. The helicopter would never fly again, but the time unit was intact, which didn't mean that it would work. They held a powwow at their camp. It had been, they decided, simpler to move the camp than to remove the body of old Buster. So they had shifted at dawn, leaving the old Mastodon still sprawled across the helicopter. In a day or two, they knew the great bones would be cleanly picked by the carrion birds, the lesser cats, the wolves and foxes, and the little skulkers. Getting the time unit out of the helicopter had been quite a chore, but they finally had managed it, and now Adams sat with it cradled in his lap. "The worst of it," he told them, "is that I can't test it. There's no way to know. You turn it on and it works, or it doesn't work. You can't know till you try." "That's something we can't help," Cooper replied. "The problem, seems to me, is how we're going to use it without the whirlybird." "We have to figure out some way to get up in the air," said Adams. "We don't want to take the chance of going up into the 20th century and arriving there about 6 feet underground." "Common sense says that we should be higher here than up ahead," Hudson pointed out. "These hills have stood here since Jurassic times. They probably were a good deal higher then, and have weathered down. That weathering still should be going on, so we should be higher here than in the 20th century. Not much, perhaps, but higher." "Did anyone ever notice what the altimeter read?" asked Cooper. "I don't believe I did," Adams admitted. "It wouldn't tell you anyhow," Hudson declared. "It would just give our height then and now, and we were moving, remember? And what about air pockets and relative atmosphere density and all the rest?" Cooper looked as discouraged as Hudson felt. "How does this sound?" asked Adams. "We'll build a platform 12 feet high. That certainly should be enough to clear us, and yet small enough to stay within the range of the unit's force field." "And what if we're 2 feet higher here?" Hudson pointed out. "A fall of 14 feet wouldn't kill a man unless he's plain unlucky." "It might break some bones." "So it might break some bones. You want to stay here or take a chance on a broken leg?" "All right, if you put it that way. A platform, you say. A platform out of what?" "Timber. There's lots of it. We just go out and cut some logs." "A 12-foot log is heavy, and how are we going to get that big log uphill?" "We drag it." "We try to, you mean." "Maybe we could fix up a cart," said Adams after thinking a moment. "Out of what?" Cooper asked. "Rollers, maybe. We could cut some and roll the logs up here." "That would work on level ground," Hudson said. "It wouldn't work to roll a log uphill. It would get away from us. Someone might get killed." "The logs would have to be longer than 12 feet anyhow," Cooper put in. "You'd have to set them in a hole, and that takes away some footage." "Why not the tripod principle?" Hudson offered. "Fasten 3 logs at the top and raise them." "That's a gin pole, a primitive derrick. It'd still have to be longer than 12 feet. 15, 16 maybe. And how are we going to hoist 3 16-foot logs? We'd need a block and tackle." "There's another thing," said Cooper. "Part of those logs might just be beyond the effective range of the force field. Part of them would have to, mind you, move in time, and part couldn't. That would set up a stress." "Another thing about it," added Hudson, "is that we'd travel with the logs. I don't want to come out in another time with a bunch of logs flying all around me." "Cheer up," Adams told them. "Maybe the unit won't work anyhow." Chapter 7. The general sat alone in his office and held his head between his hands. "The fools," he thought. "The goddamn knuckle-headed fools. Why couldn't they see it as clearly as he did?" For 15 years now, as head of Project Mastodon, he had lived with it night and day, and he could see all the possibilities as clearly as if they had been actual fact. Not military possibilities alone, although as a military man he naturally would think of those first. The hidden bases, for example, located within the very strongholds of potential enemies. Within, yet centuries removed in time. Many centuries removed, and only seconds distant. He could see it all. The materialization of the fleets, the swift, devastating blow, then the instantaneous retreat into the fastnesses of the past. Terrific destruction, but not a ship lost, nor a man. Except that if you had the bases, you need never strike the blow. If you had the bases and let the enemy know you had them, there would never be a provocation. And on the home front, you'd have air raid shelters that would be effective. You'd evacuate your population, not in space, but time. You'd have the sure and absolute defense against any kind of bombing, fission, fusion, bacteriological, or whatever else the labs had in stock. And if the worst should come, which it never would with a setup like that, you'd have a place to which the entire nation could retreat, leaving to the enemy the empty, blasted cities and the lethally dusted countryside. Sanctuary. That had been what Hudson had offered the then Secretary of State 15 years ago. And the idiot had frozen up with the insult of it and had Hudson thrown out. And if war did not come, think of the living space and the vast new opportunities, not the least of which would be the opportunity to achieve peaceful living in a virgin world, where the old hatreds would slough off and new concepts have a chance to grow. He wondered where they were, those 3 men who had gone back into time. Dead, perhaps? Run down by a mastodon? Or stalked by tigers? Or maybe done in by warlike tribesmen? No, he kept forgetting there weren't any in that era. Or trapped in time, unable to get back, condemned to exile in an alien time. Or maybe, he thought, just plain disgusted. And he couldn't blame them if they were. Or maybe, let's be fantastic about this, sneaking in colonists from someplace other than the watched Wisconsin farm, building up in actuality the nation they had claimed to be. They had to get back to the present soon, or Project Mastodon would be killed entirely. Already the research program had been halted, and if something didn't happen quickly, the watch that was kept on the Wisconsin farm would be called off. "And if they do that," said the general, "I know just what I'll do." He got up and strode around the room. "By God," he said, "I'll show 'em." Chapter 8. It had taken 10 full days of backbreaking work to build the pyramid. They'd hauled the rocks from the creek bed half a mile away and had piled them stone by rolling stone to the height of a full 12 feet. It took a lot of rocks and a lot of patience, for as the pyramid went up, the base naturally kept broadening out. But now all was finally ready. Hudson sat before the burned out campfire and held his blistered hands before